Welcome back to the Orca Boat Shop. My name's Rod and we're working on the video series on building this little 6-foot kayak model. So when we left off last, I had 4 coats of epoxy on here. It's now cured. We're going to turn it over and see what the inside looks like. I switched out all of the little pony clamps, the spring clamps that were holding it all together because I was worried that epoxy was going to drip all over them. And I just added a few small C-clamps underneath here, which I can now take off. We should be able to just lift this off. And there you go. Not too bad. I mean, there's a bit of cleaning inside, but only really between the bulkheads, but it's pretty smooth inside there. I'm happy with that. So I can remove my strong back now and we'll just work on it flat on the bench here, or maybe make some little tiny cradle to stop it from rolling around on me. The area I need to clean is inside here for the cockpit opening, because all of this will be covered, and I will pour some epoxy in here and seal everything up to hold it together. But I have been sanding inside here a couple of times. I've sanded, I wet it down with water, swells up the open grain, I wet it down. I just can't even really get a good even a small palm sander in here, or what we call a little mouse sander here, and I've been just doing this by hand, and I'm really not enjoying this very much at all. But we're getting there. The downside of this is that some of these strips are quite a larger open grain, and they swell a lot more than the tighter grain pieces, and after I sand it all smooth, wet it down, some swells up larger or thicker than others, and I have to sand it back down smooth. But what I'm really trying to figure is where a cockpit will go. Somewhere, I don't even know how big it is from the plans yet, but somewhere in this area here, about yay big. And so how much will be seen if someone was to pick the model up and look inside. But I think I'm getting close. I think that'll be the final wet down. One more sanding with 80 grit and 120, and then we're ready to epoxy coat this.
Go on. Go find it. Hurry up. Where's it, girl? You lose it? Good girl. Ready? Are you ready?
Little Kiska model. I've got a couple of strips down the shears, 2 or 3 down the shear line, and I've run 3 down the center line. Now I think I'm just going to add a little bit of color to this. This is going to be some really nice dark red cedar, so I would think that a nice piece of yellow cedar in here would be quite a nice little feature to be adding. And what I'm planning to do is put 1 down the shear and then 1 down the center, so that at the bow and stern up here, the 2 pieces will come together in a nice point, rather than just sort of end nowhere in color. So the first thing I need to do is clean up these edges. Now I've also made these strips on the deck a little bit thicker than I did on the hull, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Is that I actually found in the hull, just trying to get the pieces to line up nicely and stay on the forms was a little bit difficult, and I wish I'd had a little more thickness to allow me to fare some of the lumber out and get it as smooth as possible. So here I'm actually running almost a 1/4 inch thick strips. They're a little bit off center, not off center, but off alignment, but that's fine, because once I sand it all down and plane it all down, it's going to be super smooth. And then all I need to do up the front here is I'm lining up with the very front tip, kind of marking on the back here where the taper will be, so the taper will go from that point through to there, and there's also quite a bit of a bevel on it. And just as with all strips that run from end to end, it's always, the difficult part is to make it fit just perfectly at both ends and snap into place. So I've made that end. I then just held it in place. I worked my way down to the stern. I made a small reference line across both the strips here as to where it should line up. Mark the end, fit it. I don't have to keep putting the end number 1 in. I can just come back here and keep shaving this, sanding it, shaping it until I get the fit I want and the little marks line up. So we're ready to glue that one in. As I work my way out from the center line on the bow portion and the stern portion, broken up by the cockpit, eventually I need to make a piece that is going to span from the front right through to the back so that it's solid wood where the cockpit, or the side of the cockpit would be, and that's about right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is to fit this piece in the end here, put any little beveling needed onto here, glue it into place, then fit the other end. This will actually have to come down. It's kind of swooping up, but it needs to get back down to the form here. I don't really like to plank it by having the strips come up and then bend down and go back to the stern portion of the deck. It just doesn't, it really makes for an odd shape, but at some point in time the strip will cross all the forms right through about here. So these are a bit high. I'm going to start to need to pull them down. Alright, I've got a pretty good fit on the bow end of it here. I've beveled the edges. It meets up pretty nicely with that strip there. I think I will put a little bit more of a bevel in the center area here. So that it will start to work its way down. Now the question is, how do I fit it and how am I going to work this down to the very end? I'm going to kind of just give it a shot here, make a little reference mark on that strip there. It looks like it would end there and cross at the shear about there, so it would be a mark across there. Alright, I played with it and got it to fit at both ends. So I pull this down, my reference mark lines up beautifully at that end. It's going to be easy to glue it to the stern portion of the deck here, but there's a bit of a sort of a curve into here that has, so I'm going to have to push this up towards the center line at the same time pulling down on the foredeck and getting that all to tighten. Now, there's going to be a bit of a gap in here, but the cockpit will be cutting out of there anyways. And all the rest of the strips I can either run from the center line out with a bit of an arc to it, but I can alternate between coming up from the shear and down from the center. So things will slow down a little bit as planking continues. I think I may end up taking my heat gun and heating this area up and see if I can actually bend it down a little bit on the sides.